Hello, this is Yara here, and today we're going to talk about the top 5 best decks for YCS Houston. So YCS Houston is coming up in a week from now, and everybody's been buying their cards on TCG or from their friends. And if you're planning to go to YCS Houston in a week, or if you plan to go to a regionals or a case tournament or a big locals, at least you're going to know what the top decks are going to be at that tournament and what are their pros and cons, because I'm actually going to go through the pros and cons of each deck so you know like what to do against those decks. So yeah, let's get started. So for the top 5 deck, we have Blue Eyes Primite. Some of the pros of this deck is that it has a lot of recursion, right? Every turn you're able to special summon out your Blue Eyes, either from deck or graveyard. You're able to recycle your barrel. You get so much recursion with these cards. But one of the cons is that going first and going second, it doesn't have that explosive of a time, right? So it's not like a Tempai going second. It's not like an FTK deck going first. It kind of sets up a decent board going first, and it has a decent time going second. So what this deck tries to do is that it tries to outgrind the opponent by being able to get multiple resources through multiple turns and beating them out like that, right? So yeah, but if you're planning to bring this to a tournament, I think that it's a good choice. That's you can play a lot of non-engine. You can main deck Veiler, 3 Veilers, because it's searchable in this deck. So yeah, this deck is pretty good, and that's why I have it as the number 5 deck. So now for the number 4 deck, we have Centurion. So Centurion actually won a regional. Shout out Ryan. And some of the pros of this deck is that it can set up a very scary board going first, right? It can set up double Cosmic Blazar. It can set up other synchros that it needs. So it also has a trap card that's a disruption. So it's not just monster interruption. It's also like a trap card. And it can play under shifter pretty decently as well. So even under draw. So it can play through a lot of those game ender cards that other decks lose to. So some of the cons of this deck, however, is that a well-timed Imperm or a well-timed Veiler on the synchros can just kind of end their turn. An Imperm on the Axilla or an Imperm on Primera can kind of skip their turn. So they sometimes they lose to those low impact hand traps that other decks don't lose to. But if they can play through them, then they can set up a pretty crazy going first end board. So but I think if you plan to bring this deck to a tournament, you're going to have a pretty good time, right? As long as you know what you're doing. So that's why I have Centurion as my number 4 deck. So now for the number 3 deck, we have Mermail. So Mermail has perhaps the best going first end board, right? They're able to get rid of multiple cards from the opponent's hand, right? They're able to... Mooning Glacier is an insane card. So Minstrel is able to look at the opponent's hand and see what they have in their hand. I remember when I used to play Noble Knights, I used to play Connector with Dolphin, and even if Dolphin saw the hand and didn't destroy any cards, just the fact that you get hand knowledge is huge, because now you know what to play around, right? Like if you see like a Dark Ruler no more, then guess what? You're gonna go for Mooning Glacier, try to get rid of the Dark Ruler no more, or at least try to see like how you're able to play around the Dark Ruler no more. So, or if you see like an Nibiru, then you're like, okay, I'm not gonna overextend. I'm gonna try to make an early Toad. Speaking of Toad, right? We see Bahamut Shark on the screen. They can set up double Toad. Toad in this deck is insane because not only can you negate and take something, you can also recycle from your grave. So pretty crazy stuff on this deck. And Prince, a 1-card combo, an insane. You can see it you can summon it off of 1-for-1 as well. So yeah, if Konami doesn't hit this deck, it's gonna be tearing apart hands, right? Getting rid of your hand with Mooning Glacier and Minstrel. So yeah, I mean, Mermail is a scary deck to go. Some of the cons, however, of this deck is that it loses to cards like Shifter, cards like Dweller, some of those that kind of get rid of the graveyard. So that's why we see a lot of this Mermail lists have Call By in the main, they have Cross-Out in the main, they have on the side, they have stuff like XYZ Encore or Droplet to try to stop those Dweller from resolving, because they kind of need their graveyard to be able to get multiple resources, right? Sometimes even Droll stops them as well. Just depends like what kind of hand to start off with, because they want to take maximum advantage of Dragoon, the one that you see on the screen, so that they're able to get multiple searches. So But yeah, Mermos is a powerhouse. That's why I have it as the number 3 for now. For the number 2, we have Malice. Malice is crazy, right? Some of the pros of this deck is that they can play Shifter, right? Best Shifter deck of the format, in my opinion. I know I play Flow Underease, but what can you say, right? But yeah, they can play Shifter, and a lot of decks lose to Shifter. The Link 3s are absolute powerhouse. That's why they play a lot of Bestial. So in case they get Imperm or Ash Blossom, they're able to just normal summon one of their Malice monsters, link it off, Bestial the monster engraved, summon it from the banished pile, go to a Link 3, and then they could keep extending from there. White Binder, just such a nuisance when it comes to destroying the opponent's graveyard or getting pluses. Heart Cryptor, of course, a powerhouse as well. So an insane end board going first, and can break boards going second as well. Some of the cons of this deck is that it loses to stuff like Lancia. So if they don't have a way to deal with Lancia, that kind of skips their turns a lot of the times, right? They have to pass, or Chaos Hunter. So that's why we see a lot of them playing stuff like Thrust, so they're able to take the Chaos Hunter and then link it off. Or we see them playing Call By, so they get rid of the Lancia. They have to play Call By, so, or Cross Out, something like that. So yeah, that's some of their cons. But if you don't get hit by one of those turn skip cards, they can play through Nibiru, Ash, Imperm, Veiler, you call it. So Malice as number 2. I don't think anybody's surprised to see it on this list. I think some people might be surprised that it's not number 1, but I think there's a deck that's stronger than this. So I'm gonna have some honorable mentions right now. So honorable mentions is gonna be Tenpai. You know, Tenpai got hit pretty hard on the last bandits. Their consistency went down the drain. So, but you know, they still have a very good going second turn, right? They can play stuff like all the Molcharmies, right? They can play, you know, all the cards Droplet. They can play so many cards. So if I lose to a Tenpai in a tournament, I wouldn't be surprised, right? They just have to open the correct hand, and they can still OTK through so many things. We have Fire King. Fire King won a pretty big tournament. I think it was like last month. And some of the cool things that doesn't lose to the Molcharmy, Perulia, or the one that draws when you summon from the extra deck or deck. So it doesn't lose to it because it just relies mainly on their Garunix, on their main deck monsters. So that's some of the cool things about that. So but Garunix, the one that you see on the screen, is a powerhouse, because that means that even if your opponent does something like normal summon Ash Blossom, they try to go to battle phase, it's scary, because that means that if they're able to crash into one of your monsters, then they can just summon Garunix from grave or hand, and then they're able to pop something from their deck, and then they can keep extending from there. So I mean, Fire King is pretty strong in my opinion. And then lastly, for the honorable mentions, we have Voice's Voice. Voice's Voice is one of those decks that doesn't lose to Shifter, doesn't lose to Droll that hard depending on their hand, doesn't lose to the Molcharmies, right? They can do a lot of like, they don't have to summon from the extra deck, they don't have to summon from the deck. So they might be able to get one draw off Perulia, but then you can kind of set it up so you ritual summon during your opponent's turn. So yeah, it can do some pretty good stuff. They play Herald, they can main deck Lancia because it's a fairy. So if you play Herald the orange light plus Lancia, then you're able to negate stuff. So it has a good time into some of the turn ending cards, right? So I think Voices was still a powerhouse in my opinion. But that's it for the honorable mentions. I didn't want to mention Odeon. I know some people are going to call me out and say, where's Odeon? Well, the thing about Odeon is that I don't know if the tops that it's getting is because people are not reading the cards, but I don't see how the deck is that strong in my opinion. You end up with a pop and a negate, and that's it. So I don't see how that's strong in my opinion. Maybe I'm missing something. But I just think people haven't read the cards, and that's why they're losing to the deck. But anyways, now for the number 1 deck, we have Ryziel. So I know you're seeing Mitsurugi and Pinsmith. It's because I don't know which version of Ryziel is the best, and I didn't want to put like 3 different Ryziel decks on the top 5. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm just putting Ryziel, period. It could be like pure Ryziel, it could be Mitsuguri Ryziel, it could be Pinsmith Ryziel. I don't know which version is the best, but I do think Ryziel as a whole is the best deck right now, especially now that the Tachyon card came out, and you're able to get even more consistency. And aside from consistency, you're able to search some pretty strong cards that might be able to end somebody's turn, right? So yeah, I mean, some of the pros of this deck, the consistency through the roof. They can set up stuff like dwellers. If you're playing against Mermail, setting up the dweller is just, you're just gonna skip their turn. They don't lose that hard to shifter. They can at least end up on a detonator. So yeah, the consistency through the roof. Some of this cons to this deck is that if you're playing against stuff like Malice, Dweller is not really a game ender, since they don't really need their graveyard. And Shifter might make your end board not that strong, especially if you're playing the Fiendsmith version. So that's why a lot of people gravitate towards the pure Ryziel, because at least they don't have to rely on the Fiendsmith cards if they get shifted. So yeah, not that many cons in my opinion. That's why I think it's the best deck of the format. The cons are just not there. You can play around stuff like the Molcharmies, depending on which Molcharmy you want to play around. You can start off with X Ryziel, or just, there's many lines to play around the Molcharmies, or play around Nibiru, play around Imperm on the detonator. There's a lot of lines. So but the recursion of this deck plus the consistency is what I think makes it the best deck of the format. But that's just my opinion, right? So what do you guys think? Do you guys disagree or agree with my top 5? What decks would you guys put on the top 5? Would you change the list? Anything? So I want to hear it in the comments below. But if you're planning to go to YCS Houston, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna try to top, right? I've been practicing. Not the most meta deck, but I've been practicing a lot. So and aside from all that, I'm trying to have fun at YCS Houston, you know, just talk to people. I enjoy that a lot. But anyways, guys, I'll catch you on the next video. I'm about to go watch some solo leveling right now. Take care.